change almost immediately. I mean, nothing will illustrate to you more clearly what it's like, what the influence of hormones is than to watch after M take testosterone for a few weeks. You know, it's a totally different gig. You know, it's a totally different gig, and the same is true in the other direction. And yet I do believe also that there's another kind of hovering, unidentified space that I actually occupy, that sort of, that isn't separate from endocrinological systems, but is somehow dealing with the alchemy of them in a different way, especially through the use of creativity.
You know, it's...
Does that answer your question?
First of all, can you take this back away? It's too heavy.
You know why
you
clutch
don't need
passes, it's part
Come
of my
on, you don't
persona.
need this back. We have to have a free conversation. Let's put this back. Okay. That's much better.
And I've always said that I think that, you know, the most useful thing we could do is to implement a mandatory 3-month course in the hormone of the opposite sex for every student in high school, so that they could start to create some empathic pathway
That could be
toward the experience of the seemingly, you know, people are raised with this idea that the opposite sex is sort of unfathomable. You know, the experience of the opposite sex is so mysterious and unfathomable.
Do you think American system will accept it almost immediately?
Well, we'll start in Scandinavia. We'll start in Scandinavia.
Much more safer. But you know, talking about in between, I'm so interested about the whole idea in between. But not just in between in the sense of gender, but also in between as an artist. Because I really think that we are living in space in between. You know, in between everything. Like we are kind of modern nomads that we don't belong anywhere and belong everywhere at the same time. And this is very much parallel with transgender. It's almost the same thing.
Well, except that I find, you know, scientists often sort of, they pretend that they're operating within these hormonally neutral, some non-hormonal system. You know, they think, like for instance, that scientific rational thought is a gender neutral pastime. You know, but in fact, I would say, you know, in my imagination, it's a very testosterone-based pastime. You know, whereas like estrogen-based systems of thought might lean towards more intuitive thought. You know, I know that's a stereotype, but it's based in, you know, more empathic thought. You know, less, you know, less of a brain sitting on the end of a stick, you know, in the middle of nowhere. More of something that's rooted in the biological reality of, and the biological, aware more of the biological repercussions. I mean, you always said, was it you who said you bled more by the age of 14 than most men have? You've seen more blood by the age of 14 than most men have seen in their lives?
Yes, I think I did. This is unrelated. You know, you asked me in the beginning where I come from. I just came from different places, but the 2 days ago I came from Russia, and there was a very big symposium on the, you know, the brain and the future of the robotics, and it was incredible that what they're doing right now, trying to really figure out how we can actually implant human brain to live in the robot, and also how we can actually create this artificial intelligence. And they are, all of them are androgen. There is no male or female. Entire robotic and future of the technology is androgen.
But there's, up till now, there's not been a reality of a non-hormonally developed brain. You know, everyone's brain develops flooded, almost everyone's, besides biological androgens. You know, very few sort of pseudo-hermaphrodites develop with a brain that's either flooded most of their life with testosterone or with estrogen. So the systems, you know, the sort of subtle systems that in my mind could implicitly affect your approach and your thinking are in place. And I don't even know if we've even begin to fathom what a truly androgynous human thought is. I don't think we've had one yet. I mean, maybe there's a few people on the farthest margins of society that have journeyed to that place, but they're certainly not born. I mean, very few people are born without hormonal systems. You know, So, I mean, what is androgynous thought really gets to the bottom of what will the future of human thought be? Because as soon as we start to separate ourselves from these softwares, this software of testosterone affects me in a certain way, estrogen affects me in a certain way, then you start to realize that you're looking through the whole of life through a certain color of glass. Do you know what I mean? That you're wearing a colored glass. Is estrogen-based thinking clearer than androgynous thought or non-hormonally influenced thought? We don't know what non-hormonally influenced thought is, but it's sort of a scary prospect.
So before we go back to the movie, I just want to tell you something completely different.
Do you think I sound nuts? I mean, what do you think?
We're going to talk to the public later on. No, just let me tell you, let me say some other things what happened from my country. It's incredible, interesting. We are talking the past. We're talking First World War, Second World War, in Montenegro, when they will, the men go to war and lost and just die. And the women will stay home with 10 children or 11 children, and she have to survive and she have to feed the family. What will happen? She will start wearing the clothes of the man. She will stop her period, growing moustache and beard, and turn to man, just for this pure survival kind of thing. So it's an amazing part of the body what you can do without using anything. Just actually the fact that she have to deal with the children. It's quite interesting. And then another, just to tell you two totally different examples, so just totally another cultures comes from. So this is one phenomenon. And the amazing photographs of the women with the moustache, beard, and the weapons, with 10 children behind them. And another interesting thing, it's still few people left, maybe 3 or 4, in Albania and Montenegro and Bulgaria. And they are actually called virginas. They're the women who are not lesbian, who are not androgyny, who are not in any of this way, but they decide in very early they use to actually stay virgins, and by staying virgins, they claim entire rights like any man. So they're accepted in men's society. They can go to the war, and replace the brothers. Instead of brothers stay home, they go to the war. They can, smoke cigarettes in men's clubs. They can wear men's clothes, and just by the fact that actually they are virgins, it's quite interesting. And there's just few left.
In America, I think during the Second World War, there was also like a changing of the guards, where suddenly women were allowed to occupy more men's roles out of necessity. That the spectrum of what women could do within their assigned gender became much broader, and they got to flex a lot more muscle. But then as soon as the war closed down, then it was back to business as usual. But that brings me to a question, an interesting, thing about, you've often said, and quite controversially said sometimes, that you don't identify as a feminist, partly because of your history, your own developmental history, coming from a war-torn country where actually the woman, your mother, was a more powerful figure in many ways, and a more threatening figure than the man, and certainly seemed more empowered in a way. I can't really explain it, but could you explain that?
Just, I always think that to me, when I came to America or to the West, especially here, the feminism is such a strange thing for me. I don't see it. I don't experience in my country that the woman had the entire power like a man, and even more. And I really, when I become an artist, I don't want it to be, I always say, yes, I am female, but I'm not female artist, I'm just artist, because artists don't have gender. I don't believe in gender, I don't believe in male or female, I just believe in very simple category. It's a good art or bad art, who is making is not important, that's it.
And yet your work is, that's a kind of
I just want to say, because I just want to say Americans are so obsessed with the seat exhibition, how many women artists are there, how many men artists, how many Puerto Ricans, how many American Indians. It's all about the numbers. It's not important. What is important is the quality and concept, which I think is the main thing we forget.
I think it's interesting for you to say that, and yet so much of your work has been about being an object in space, like performatively, your body borders on being an object, and so much of it has been about endurance, duration, like bleeding, often suffering, you know, often suffering through brutal female archetypes, hairbrushing, you know, being cut, being passively receiving anyone's impulses to hurt you, you know, which strike in so many people's minds like profoundly, you know, gendered implications, you know. So, you know, and so I wanted to ask you, but in relation to this piece, did you find any inroads to this idea of the feminine object to look at and meditate upon over? Because it's obvious there is an element of duration in this piece of what seems like sameness.
No, I just want to say that it's so important how every society, every culture, every different background of culture project what you want to see. I mean, I just want to say my piece in which I done in Italy, which was I put 72 objects on the table, and you can do anything you want with me for 6 hours, including killing me. It was a pistol. So what did people project there? They projected 3 basic Italian images: image of Madonna, image of the mother, and image of the whore. And this, if it would be another society, it would be different projections. So here, when you have this movie, that is all depends from which kind of society and where you come from, what you project on the females standing there and turning around. You know, it's really everybody will have different story. It's like a wonderful Rashomon movie of Kurosawa when you have 6 people sitting in the forest killing, but everybody's so just a little piece of something. They're sitting around the fire and they're discussing, and there are 7 different stories, and that 7 different stories create 7 realities. And here, every story is another reality, and from where you come from, that's what you project.
And what you saw, you said earlier, was suffering.
You know, not just suffering, but it was incredibly emotionally moving, the story, that each story is so different, and how by standing there, you see them so naked, so vulnerable, and then the way how it's related to, connected with you singing, and that's all how impact, you know, was made, and the way how the director Charles and how he put this together is just wonderful. I think really, you see, another thing we have to talk tonight is about Charlie. I think so important.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Because, you know, the Charlie, he always take the themes was so difficult. I mean, look, Lee Bowery film. It's so important, so important. Lee Bowery was a pioneering, and like in so many fields, and still his work and influence is so strong and influenced so much young generation. Then this piece he just made with you. Then you know with the Clark, you know, the dance. It's just all these things. The way how he take things, the way how he do the Merskanigan, you know, the way to film ballet. You know, till Charlie came up there, there was the most boring thing is to see documentary of the ballet, because it was nothing really interesting. It was just always the camera is so static, it's so uninteresting. And the way how he worked, it just made this whole thing so different.
And what's your memories of let's talk a bit about your collaboration with Charlie.
I don't know if people